Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Today, we're talking about Mr. Gary Vines and our podcast we did with him on Monday. As always, we're hitting some listener Q&As on this Thursday episode. You can hit the show notes down below to get timestamps if you want to skip ahead to those. Jacob, how you doing?
Doing real well. By the way, you left out old Lyle Gilbert, too, of Houndstooth.
Yes, sir. Old Lyle, man. He's been on a couple times. We always joke with Lyle because when we very first started the podcast, like 2018, we recorded looking back, well, I don't have any evidence of this because I don't really remember what all.
Based off your feelings.
Based off my feelings, a really good podcast with him. We were talking about a certain WMA that we had a little bit of experience with, and I don't think we named it. I don't know. We might have named it back then because we didn't know what we were doing.
Yep.
But it wouldn't have mattered because like 4 people would have heard it anyways because nobody listened back then. But anyways, we recorded that with Lyle years ago, and it was like a really good episode, and we lost it. We lost the episode. I can't remember if it was like a corrupted file or if like it accidentally got deleted or something happened to it, and it never came out. And Lyle was like, "Man, I thought I did good. You know, why didn't they ever release it?" I was joking with him about it. I'm like, yeah, you were the first one that got away from us.
Yeah.
And so for years, I think Lyle thought that we didn't like the episode and we just didn't drop it. And I was like, no, dude, I promise it wasn't that. Like, we for real lost the episode.
Yeah.
So we probably should have communicated that a little bit better. But yeah, so Lyle, dude, he's a Southern Outdoorsman alum, like OG.
Yeah, big listener to the podcast too.
Yeah. And I was telling Lyle yesterday that when we recorded with him, that's back when we had one of those microphones. What was it called? I think we still have it in that closet.
Yeti.
Yeah, it's a Yeti microphone, like a blue Yeti. It's not actually blue; it's black.
It's the company brand.
But anyways, it's just one of those big microphones. It's like $80 on Amazon.
Yeah,
maybe back then.
No, you got it from Walmart or Best Buy or something like that.
Yeah, you can get them at Best Buy, or at least you could. I don't know if they still make them because this was like 6 years ago now. And we had him. There was a bunch of books stacked up next to it, and the phone was on top of the books on speaker, and we were all talking into the same microphone, which, if anybody's wanting to start a podcast, that's not how you do it. That's a bad idea. That's terrible. Awful audio quality. You can't separate the tracks, so I can't isolate Jacob's nose whistling and get rid of it, so it's just on there. But anyway, back in the day, that's how we did the first 50 episodes or so.
Probably 40.
Yeah.
So I think around 50 is when we went to more of a headset mic setup.
Yeah.
And a different recorder. And that was still a pain in the butt because that's kind of an interesting thing. Like, some people probably don't care about this, but like when it comes to like podcasts, especially like 6 years ago, there was very little information out about equipment. Like, nobody wanted to share anything. You couldn't find it on forums, or they were talking about it was like audio engineers talking about like buying like these huge mixers, like audio mixers that you'd use for like not a podcast. I mean, you can use it for a podcast, but God, it complicates stuff so much.
Yeah, way overkill.
And finally,
extreme overkill.
Yeah. Anyways, we bought one of the recorders that a lot of people had talked about and used it for probably a year and a half, 2 years maybe, and then finally went over to like some more designated podcast recording mixer kits.
Well, then they started coming out with like actual podcasting equipment. Like this recorder we use now is actually for podcasting, and they didn't make that stuff back then.
No, we were having to use different field recorders and amplifiers, and God, it was cables everywhere. Which, I mean, there's still cables everywhere. Y'all can't see it because you can't see behind the camera, but there's still cables everywhere. But it's not as bad.
A lot of cables in a small room.
And the worst part was, like, again, probably overkill for a lot of people. Don't really care about it, but like, the inputs, like your little aux inputs for like some of from like the amplifier to the recorder, sometimes they get all like fickled and like you got to blow on, or like if you touch it the wrong way, it'll like starts staticky, and it's like
someone bumps it and it's like
or you had your phone too close to it and it'd be like bzzz, it'd be buzzing. You're like, oh God.
You're like, everyone take your phones out, lay them in the middle of the table.
For a lot of podcasts, we would do it. We'd grab our phone, throw it on the ground, be like, get it away from the equipment, and like that's how we would have to do podcasts.
Oh yeah, back in the good old days.
And then also there wasn't any like Bluetooth technology at the time to like link your phone or like link a Zoom call or anything directly to the recorder.
Oh,
so it was all cabled, and that was terrible.
Awful. Everything was completely jerry-rigged. Every part of it. Every aspect.
Is it jerry or jury-rigged?
Jerry? What did I say?
I've heard jury-rigged too.
Jury-rigged?
Yeah, like you rigging the jury. Get that guilty. Yeah, that's Clay Newcomb talked about that, I think, on one of his podcasts.
I didn't hear that one.
It slowly turned to Jerry.
Jerry.
But
Who is Jerry?
I don't know. That's why it's like.
Why is he rigging
I
stuff?
heard jury rig. Like you rigged it. Like, oh, he's innocent, but he's guilty. Okay.
Okay.
You bring up that cash, that water cash, start paying him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, anyways, yeah, that's so that's a little bit of history. The history of podcasting, I guess, apparently.
Yeah, it's a lot easier now to at least
so
get your
much
equipment.
easier
It's
now.
expensive, but it's a lot easier to get your equipment and stuff now and have like dedicated, like now there's multiple companies making like dedicated recording kits. And we've used a couple different ones of them. We get people that we work with, other podcasters that use different equipment. And it's like so much simpler now than it was 4 or 5 years ago.
You can still make it complicated. Nick Adair's setup is complicated.
Very complicated.
It's extreme. It's way overkill.
Yeah.
Way overkill. Anyways, all right, let's talk about Gary. I've been wanting to get Gary on the podcast for actually a couple years now because, again, like he's pretty popular here in Alabama. Like a lot of people know who he is. I've known about him for years, and I just wanted to talk to him. I knew he killed the state record turkey, and I knew that he had that Spurmaster call and that he did some kind of unique stuff. So I wanted to talk to him about it, and I didn't really have a direct connection to him for a while. And then Lyle started producing that Spurmaster call for Gary and selling it. So he now sells it through Houndstooth. And I think we asked Lyle at the NWTF convention, or maybe before it, we're like, hey, can you set this up? And he's like, oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we got to make it happen. Got to go up to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, old T-Town.
Oh, T-Town.
And interview Gary. What were your thoughts? Because you weren't familiar with him at all, were you?
I mean, I've heard him like on the Rick and Bubba show, which, you know, if you're from Alabama or in the Deep South and you've listened to Rick and Bubba for the last like 30 years, their radio show, you know who we're talking about. If you're kind of outside of there and you didn't really care much about talk radio, you probably don't know who Rick and Bubba is. But I've heard him on there in the past, but like I don't listen to Rick and Bubba anymore. Like I don't listen to radio, period.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, you could be going to the office and you always like listen to it in the mornings and stuff like that. And like I don't. But like, yeah, Gary the Bulldozer Man. Like, that's how I knew him. Which I never should have asked. Like, is it because he does like land work or something for like those guys?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes more sense.
That's where it came from.
Now, I'm like, is he just like a crazy bulldozer operator? He's like certified.
Dude, it's so funny when they get him on there. 'Cause I still listen to talk radio because like there was a time where I didn't, and I just listened to hunting podcasts. And now after doing 570 odd hunting podcasts, I gotta listen to something else, you know. And so I still listen to it a lot. But yeah, dude, they get him on there. It is hilarious. Like that story that Gary was talking about, scaring the guys and getting the cops called. That's just one of them. But they have so many good ones like that. I tried to find it on their YouTube. I don't think it's on their YouTube. It might be on like one of their best ofs or something.
He's lucky the other guys didn't have any guns with them because like. We got some friends. One in particular that comes to mind that would have returned fire. Okay, would have returned fire
100%.
And you know it would have been bad. So
oh my gosh,
it's like that was a very risky prank. But
yeah, that was pretty funny. I think you could probably render that whole podcast down. Like probably the best tip that you got from it was Gary talking about with turkey hunting. You're trying to like conquer his mind, but you're really trying to conquer your own mind.
Yeah.
Really, when it comes down to it, you probably work yourself out of more turkeys than you'd think.
Yeah, no, when he said that, and that was kind of late in the podcast. So if y'all didn't hear that, that means you didn't make it far enough into the episode where he
go back and listen to it.
Yep, it's like last 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes of the episode, he brings that up, and I thought that was a really, really good point because, like, I go back to my hunt with Nick Adair in West Virginia last year. We were all on some turkeys right off the roost, and I was trying to overcomplicate stuff. And Nick's like, "Just sit down, let's freaking kill one of these birds." And I was like, anyways. But like, definitely like got way too excited in the moment.
Yeah,
got a little shark eyes, but also kind of like froze up a little bit. Like, oh crap, we got a bird here, got a bird. I mean, within like 60 yards of us roosted off the side of this mountain.
Yeah,
and anyway, and I think that's a really good point. Like, you got to conquer your own mind. And also have confidence and have the patience, and also, especially like what he was talking about, what Gary was talking about, like really like being a little more subtle with your calling, probably would pay off a lot more in dividends, or pay off a lot better throughout the season. Because the one thing that he talked about, I'm sure you picked up on it, and I'm sure some of the listeners picked up on it, was him talking about like if the bird's not ready to die now,
he probably will be.
It's okay. Like,
give him a day.
Yeah.
Try again tomorrow.
Now I'll say this. I think he hunts a lot of private land now. And I don't know how many other guys in that private land can hunt. I think some of it he's got exclusive access. Others he's like in hunting clubs and stuff with his other members.
Yeah.
But I think kind of goes back to like when we had Scott Seals and Nick Harris on the podcast talking deer hunting, and their confidence of like passing certain deer because like more than likely no one else is going to kill that deer on public land.
Yeah.
It's like kind of having that same mindset. Like if he's not working, don't keep pressuring him. Just, hey, today's not the day. Let's move on to a different bird, drop a pin, and then come back and check him in a couple days.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really wise because I know about you because I've turkey hunted with you. It's like we're gonna beat this turkey down until like he either like flies out of the county or we get a shot at him. And a lot of times he's flying out of the county.
Yeah.
Or just shuts up and just disappears and we don't see him again.
Yeah, that definitely happens a lot. When I think back on a lot of the turkeys in recent memory over these last couple of years, and this goes right into what he's saying. The reason I didn't kill a lot of the turkeys that I should have killed was not because of the turkey.
Yeah.
They're pretty much all because of me.
Yeah.
Because like I got impatient and
100%.
pie faced them, as Josh Eiderton says.
Or shot when they're like, I go back to the first turkey, one of the first turkey hunts I ever went on with you, hunting some public land, and we got right on some rooster birds. Went to that spot where the guy had walked by you.
And Jacob choked. It was bad.
I mean, we got right on, they were roosted down this bowl, like in these pines, like down in this like little low spot. And I think we had heard, it was 2 or 3 we had heard, and one was right in front of us.
Yeah.
And I think you just did like some super soft calling. We're sitting.
No, we that was the morning.
Oh, we did fly down.
Yeah, with our hats. So we took our hats off.
Here, So, by the way, it seems like it's a little bit better with like an unstructured hat than a structured hat.
Yeah, you want like an unstructured hat, but yeah, you just beat it against your arm and it sounds like wing beats.
See how it sounds on the mic. Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
And you can use a wing too. Like I take a wing off a turkey and use like the tip of the wing.
Yep.
That works really well, but you really don't need that. Like some guys will carry that and they'll scratch it on the tree because if you ever get real close to roosted turkeys, you can hear them like scratching their feathers on the bark and everything.
Or when they fly off, they're hitting stuff on the way down.
Yeah, they're hitting stuff, like being loud. But me and you both did that, and they gobbled at it. Like we didn't call, we just. And they gobbled at it, and I was like, "Oh, it's happening!" It did.
And see that dude, because I had turkey hunted as a kid. This was like probably 6. This was, I think, might have been before we even started the podcast.
Yeah,
I think.
I think it was
like 7 years ago, and I had turkey hunted as a kid, but like very little, like just a little bit. In turkey hunted a little bit in high school. But yeah, like, and dude, all of a sudden, like, it just got quiet. They gobbled, and then I think we might have heard one of them fly down.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, we're looking down this hill into like the bowl, and the bowl's like got like privet in it and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, I see this turkey head, like kind of coming through like this, and I see the beard and everything. It's like 35 yards from us. And instead of just shooting the thing, I look over at Andy, I look over at you, and I'm like,
"Look, there's a turkey!"
I'm like, "There's a turkey right there."
Oh my God.
And the next thing I know, he's like, "Pop," and just like turns and like kind of like
points at the turkey and says, "Look, a turkey."
Yeah. Oh,
There.
dude, talk about as green can be. And he turned and like kind of like putted off, and then like next thing I know, those 2 other gobblers and him, I think, got up to our right, and we're just strutting back and forth at like, I don't know, probably 70, 80 yards. And I just screwed the pooch on. Kind of
sent it anyway.
Yeah, they kind of got a little closer, and I was like, "Oh, I think I can kill them." And that was even before TSS or any of that kind of stuff. I just, again, being super green at the time, trying to shoot, and just thought my gun was more capable than what it was, and yeah, probably didn't even touch the turkey. But it's like I look back at that, and it's like you didn't even have to call. All we did was the hat beat, and they came right to us.
Yep. And that came from a couple years of me hunting that area and knowing that, one, they like to roost in that little valley. So the way it's set up was planted pines that were not thinned, and they were just open underneath.
Wide open.
Absolute carpet of pine straw. Just nothing under there. Wide open. But there was this big drainage that goes down, like down towards a creek. And this drainage was really steep. And like one thing that I found in hill country is they like to roost next to that really steep stuff. I think they like to walk and get up on top of like a steep ridge and then pitch off and roost like off the point of that steep stuff. So I'll get on X and I'll turn on the slope angle shading and I'll look for the steepest stuff. And that's where I go like listen to see if I can hear them gobbling on the roost. Well, so we had roosted them there. Or I don't even think we roosted them. They just roost there so much that we're like, they're always here. Like, let's go get in there.
Remember, we were walking in. It was like not quite gray light, but it was right around gray light. And they started gobbling like before we were even like in the area to set up. So like we had to like sneak in there.
Yep.
Like,
hey, and you know, that's a spot where I always talk about the guy walking by on the gravel. That's the spot that happened in.
Yeah.
and they were the turkey that was gobbling was about right where they were when you shot at him, and he came crunching by and got him to shut up. But anyways, yeah, we were just right there, and we were just up at the head of the drainage, and they just pitched down and came right to us.
Yep.
Just like they're supposed to.
Just got to pull the trigger.
Screwed it up. And I think about opening day last year, all the different birds that we were on my hunting club, and how we should have killed, multiple birds last year. And that same thing, just being impatient. There was a time where we hunted with Sam. This is a classic. This is probably one of the better examples based on what they were saying about not over calling a bird, not calling thinking you have to call so loud. We went to this spot. We're walking through the clear cut, and there's a power line that goes through the property. And we see two gobblers cross that power line, like way out ahead. And they're walking right down to this ridge point, like exactly how they're supposed to. We're turkey hunting in the afternoon. And we go way around, and we get on that ridge point with them. And looking back, we're probably like 100 yards from these turkeys. Like, we're close to them. And we sit there, and I call real quiet at first. And then we give it, I don't know, not that long. And then I start calling louder. And we're like, oh, I don't know if they're there yet. And we did sit there for a while. We probably almost an hour. And eventually lost confidence. Ended up going and switching to a different spot. And we're, I don't know, maybe about half an hour later, they start gobbling right where we had just walked from.
Right where
they were there the whole time.
Yeah, probably right off the ridge point, strutting. We were close enough. They're like, we don't need to gobble. They know, hens know we're here.
Yeah.
And then after we kind of got quiet and freaking left, that's when they're like, where'd y'all go? Mm-hmm. Probably were like right back in our lap.
Yeah, 100%. That little ridge point would actually be a really good place to start before daylight.
Yeah. That's one of the spots I was talking about. Like, there's a couple of spots in the hunting club that, like, I don't even think you really need to, like, go roost a bird. You just kind of know that's where they like to be, and you just get in there early. And also, I'll tell you something that helped me out a whole bunch. So I've got, some people may know this, but so I've got a lower back injury where I broke my back, fractured my back, maybe 15 years ago. And anyway, when I sit, unless it's like, even like a really padded cushion on the ground, like my legs would start going to sleep just from like a pinched nerve and everything. So like the one thing that I started doing, I did this last year and it helped me out tremendously of like having more patience. Cause a lot of times I sit on a bird after 30 minutes, I'm like, dude, I've got to get up. Like freaking legs are numb. Like this sucks. Is I just started carrying like one of those little fold out little, like one of those little Alp chairs or whatever.
Yeah.
That sit like super low to the ground.
Alps chairs.
Alps.
ALPS.
Yeah.
Alps. Like that's the brand.
That's one of them. I mean, I know a lot of people make them, but
it's like a little turkey chair.
And like, dude, it does weigh like, I don't know, it's probably 5-6 pounds, but it's just like, to me, it's worth carrying because I know if I have that with me, I set up on a good sized tree or like in a brush pile or something, I'm a lot more confident I can sit a lot longer than if I'm just sitting on the ground. Because if I'm just sitting on the ground, it's like one of those patient days when it's like the bird's kind of working, but like trying to give them some time. It's like I'm going to be fiddling and moving around, just trying to like reposition just to kind of get really, not really blood flow, but just like my legs stop going to sleep from sitting there. And that helped me out a ton last year, specifically carrying it. This is like one of those things, like for me personally, it's like it's worth me carrying that weight in and just throwing it in my vest and everything and just, hey, I've got it. I'll use it. If a bird's like crazy hot and it's like, oh, okay, we might forget it. But if it's one of those mornings where it's like, I heard a bird and he kind of shut up and I can kind of like get repositioned. Like the one I killed on public land, that's how it was. There was 3 of them gobbling up on a big ridge point, and after the fly down, they stopped gobbling. And I wasn't going to call from below them just because I could tell someone else had been there the day before an opening day. So I did a big loop, like, I don't know, hour and a half loop up above them and around them, and then got back on the point that they were roosted on. Sat the chair up, set up against, some trees, and one calling sequence. And it was like 10 minutes later, I hear walking coming behind me, and I see a fan. I spin around in that chair and kind of get on my knee, and I see that fan come up over the ridge line next to that brush pile, and there's 2 of them. Anyways, ended up shooting one, and there's the third gobbler was down the ridge from them when I went up to grab the one I shot. But it was like, I was preparing, though, that like they were roosted there at some point. They're probably not super far away. I'm going to come up from way above them because more than likely they're probably going to drop off that ridge point or just get off on one of the bottoms. I'm going to come up from above them and get set up. And even if it was going to take a couple hours, I was going to sit there as long as possible until cutoff time because they were there, all morning long gobbling until they kind of got down.
Yeah, that's got to be like one of my favorite kinds of turkey hunts. So when you kind of have to play cat and mouse with them a little bit, and you have to be strategic and move and use the terrain, and then you kill them at like 10:30. Like I really enjoy that.
Yep.
And that's, I mean, have you had one just run down the gun barrel to you before?
Mm-mm.
No,
well, not one that I killed. No.
Oh man, yeah. Dude.
I mean, a couple of those Oklahoma turkeys tried to do that. They just I freaking whiffed on them. But
just missed.
Yeah,
yeah. It is what it is. But there's nothing more rewarding than just playing cat and mouse for like 4 or 5 hours and then you get him. I love that, dude. I just absolutely love it. And hey, there's probably some people listening right now who maybe, I mean, you're probably like primarily a deer hunter. Maybe you don't really care about turkeys that much, but I will say that turkey hunting is kind of like how we talk about squirrel hunting and other small game pursuits. It kind of forces you to go to areas that you really wouldn't go to otherwise. And actually, exactly where Mike missed the 10-point this year, we found turkey hunting. That exact spot we found it turkey hunting. And so that's just a good example of like, man, when you're chasing a critter, like if you're chasing a goblin bird, you're going to have to like work the terrain and you're going to have to learn how to navigate the terrain. And you're probably going to walk through areas that you would not have walked through otherwise. And that whole time you can be dropping pins for this coming fall for when it comes to deer hunting. Because even if you listen to this podcast and you're trying to be strategic about terrain and habitat and like where you're going to go, you're still going to overlook stuff. And sometimes the stuff you overlook is stuff that's really underwhelming on a map. Maybe it's just, I don't know, not a great looking terrain feature. Maybe it's not a great looking habitat feature, but you kind of force yourself to go through there. And all of a sudden you find some really good sign that you could capitalize on. So that's happened to me a lot of times, turkey hunting specifically, because I cover so much ground turkey hunting these days that I end up walking through stuff that I really wouldn't go scout otherwise. And you just learn more about the property, and that's going to pay dividends this coming fall. So, if you don't really care about turkeys that much, I mean, use it as a scouting tool, like get out there and just try it.
Yeah. It's like, you could be out there just scouting for deer, postseason scouting kind of early spring, or you can be postseason scouting with a shotgun in your hand.
Yeah.
And a couple calls and be like,
might get a little bonus turkey hunt.
Might get a good bonus opportunity. You're out there walking, not really calling much, and all of a sudden one starts gobbling at 9 o'clock in the morning, but let's go slip over there, try to get up above him.
Yeah, let's go see what he thinks.
Yeah.
What'd you think about Gary saying that he's killing like 90% of his birds basically off the roost?
I mean, I think that kind of comes down to the woodsmanship and knowing a property and kind of figuring out like where they like to be at. And I think that's just a lot of time in the woods, time spent. Like you kind of know where are like the general like little areas that they like to roost in, and always kind of putting yourself in position. And one thing that Lyle talks about, and Gary's kind of old school turkey hunter. He ain't going to give out too much info.
Yeah,
he even mentioned that multiple times in the podcast.
He's like, well, I don't want to say that.
Yeah, I don't want to say that.
I was like a true turkey hunter.
Yeah, so that being said, Lyle mentioned this as well in the episode that, Gary, because of woodsmanship, has a really good understanding of how to correctly set up on a turkey. And I think that's critical for a roost hunt. Like if you're trying to get one off the roost, because that's something that I feel like I've never really done super great on, is like you kind of just like work your way into a spot, but you're not thinking very strategically of like, based off where he's roosting at, first off, where's he wanting to pitch down? Like I tried to do it last year. Should have killed one off the roost. It wasn't the bird I wanted to kill. I freaking passed a gobbler thinking he was a bearded hen. He was the smallest gobbler I've ever seen. And then he got up on the freaking hillside. I'm like, that is a gobbler. He walked by at 30 yards from me. That roost hunt, I had sat up. Give you an example. I found I had hunted this area and on like kind of coming working back to the truck before the cutoff time on public, and I had bumped this gobbler right next to this little creek. Okay.
Yep.
And he kind of ran off, just big old body bird. You can see him from 100 yards away. That's that beard swinging as he's running, all big old redhead. And I get over there and I could see it was like one of the only roosteries I ever found in Alabama where like there was actually like poop underneath this giant pine tree. Okay. Right next to the creek. And then there was like this tracks, like gobbler tracks everywhere, strut marks, like in the sand and everything kind of around it. And I'm like, okay, well, this is a spot he's roosting. He's spending a ton of time here. So the next day, I'm like, hey, actually, I'm going to give him 2 days. I'm not going to hunt it tomorrow. I'm going to hunt the following day. Well, the following day was raining conditions. I slipped in there, no flashlights. One of the only times like I hear a lot of guys talk about not using a flashlight. I don't know what kind of woods y'all walk through if you're not using a flashlight. You're gonna get your eyes taken out down here, okay, or like fall over like just deadfall and just nasty stuff. Anyways, but it was one of those things like I had like a little pin flashlight and like the first, when I get to like 300 yards from the turkey, I was still using the light. And then when I got to that 250-yard marker, so I turn that light off or just like use maybe like a red light a little bit. And the last 150 yards, I just used no light and just, slow. I'm talking so slow. Like it took me, I could have been to the turkey like walking normally in like 5 minutes, and it took me like an hour and 20 minutes to get in there, maybe an hour and a half.
All before daylight.
Oh, super early. Dude, I was sitting underneath like one of these big pine trees, probably like 60 yards away from where the roost tree was, an hour before daylight easily. Like I started walking in. That's
legit.
I started walking in, I think it was like 3:30 in the morning, or almost, 3:30. Got set up at 5. Yeah, probably about 5, and then legal light was right around almost 6 o'clock or so. Anyway, so that morning it just rained. I had rain gear with me and stuff like that, and the bird didn't hear anything, didn't see anything, nothing came down. Sat until like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then I slipped back out. Next day it was going to be beautiful conditions. I'm like, he's probably going to be back in there. So I did the exact same thing. Got in super early, like an hour before daylight. Set up at that tree, get everything situated, and I'm just like, when I get there, I'm talking about I have never moved that slow in my entire life. Like, dude, I've slipped hunt for like deer and stuff. I'm talking about like every footstep, just feeling, because like you can kind of see a little bit, but like just feeling for like a stick or something, and like rolling over onto the side of your foot to kind of like get pressure off like a stick, and just easing over there super slow. I get set up, and then like right before legal light, probably 10, 15 minutes before legal light, bird starts gobbling. He's not in that roost tree. He's in another roost tree right up the little drainage from me. And I'm thinking he's like, again, 65, 70 yards from me.
Close.
And I'm like, okay. I'm like, money. Like, this is great. So I sit there. I got my gun up. I've already got my gun up and stuff. Then you start seeing there's a touch of light in the sky. And he's gobbling. I'm like, okay, cool. And right before legal light, again, I talked about this before, but I heard a turkey fly across the little creek from me. I had the creek behind me. It pitched down next to me. I'm like, crap, it's a hen.
Yeah.
Then he's going right towards this gobbler. And anyways, long story short, it walks out in the opening 35 yards from me, and I see a beard on it, but it's a tiny little body turkey. I'm like, man, it's a freaking bearded hen. And it's so dark, you couldn't see the color of the head. All you could see is just like the turkey, like the outline of the turkey, and a beard hanging down. Yeah. And I'm like, I've never seen a bearded hen, but I'm not about to go ground check a turkey, hoping he's a gobbler.
You cannot shoot bearded hens in Alabama.
Yeah. So long story short, finally it kind of eases up, and that gobbler stays on the roost, the one that's just in front of me. And when that turkey gets up on the side of the ridge, like right about maybe 75 yards from me, the sunlight is finally coming up, and I can see him, and I'm like, that's a gobbler.
Oh.
See his head and everything, just a little body gobbler. And I'm like, oh my god, that's passed. But one thing I learned is that gobbler, the one that was on the roost, the one I was trying to kill, he pitched down onto like the side of like a little like bench, like a little flat on the side of like that ditch, and he pitched down, and the other smaller gobbler walked it with him, and they started doing like, they just kind of went away from me. They kind of worked up that little ridge. And I tried to swing around and get on, but one thing I kind of thought about after the fact is he might come down here like mid-morning in this low spot, but I don't think he's going to pitch down this low spot early in the morning. And I realized this with the lighting as the sun came up. That bottom I was in, it was like not thicker, but it was like more shady than the side of the ridge. And like a turkey with his visual, he's probably going to want to pitch down someplace he can see really, really well. Yeah. And then at some point later, when the sun finally gets up mid-morning, maybe drop down to that bottom when it's a little bit cooler, and he can gobble down that bottom and straight down the bottom. So that was a good lesson from me. It's like they might not just pitch right down to the bottom. They're probably going to side hill, and you've talked about that before. Yeah. They pitch, they're roosted right off the side of a pretty steep ridge, and they're going to pitch back onto that ridge. They're not going to pitch all the way to the bottom. They're going to pitch back onto that ridge. So what I learned is need to kind of get up a little bit higher in elevation. And we tried to do that a couple days later, and so happened our buddy Kyle, he came hunting with me, and I didn't think the turkeys were going to be roosted in the spot I had him walking through. I thought the turkeys were going to be back down here to my left, kind of like where he was at, and he goes walk through, and it's just a flush of like turkeys coming out of the trees. I'm like,
and Kyle's such a nice guy. He was like profusely apologizing to you.
Yeah. He's like, dude, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, no, it's all good.
You're like, those probably weren't the turkeys. Yeah, they were the turkeys.
That's probably the hen. He's like, dude, he's like, dude, I saw them As he got through, big old turkeys. Like I could see him in the moonlight, like just the freaking turkeys.
Done messed it up, boy.
So anyway, that's an area I've got a little vendetta. I'm gonna try to go kill one at some point. It's hard to kill them in that spot for whatever reason. It's like you almost always get on a bird, but like they're just tough. But now I'm going to take kind of a little Gary's approach. Not call so loud, super soft. Because every time I've been in there, I've heard hens, but they're like so soft on the yelp.
Yeah.
And even some of the cluck, like I saw one later that morning because after they flushed, they all went everywhere. A little bit later in the morning, they were trying to like relocate. And I saw one of the hens. Just never saw the gallers never talked after that. But yeah, so I think there's like where I'm trying to get at is like hunting a roost is like you really have to have a good understanding of like more than likely where does that bird want to pitch down to and already be in that position, and whether he's just doing the fly down with your hat, especially if he can't see you. If you can see him in the tree,
he can see you.
He can see you, and it's like don't do anything at that point. Wait till he hits the ground. But like if he can't see you, just doing the fly down with the hat, up against your arm is probably all you'll need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And that's where the thing we talked about last week comes in, going and listening to them on the roost in the mornings and being just very passively scouting with your ears and listening to where they want to go and where they going once they hit the ground. That's really more important than where they're roosted.
Yep.
I mean, yeah, like that gives you a good starting point, but in the instance of the spot on the hunting club where I was talking about where we hunted with Sam, that's a good example of a spot where you could really passively scout that because the power line goes and cuts right over the top of this ridge point, and you've got probably about 150 yards of woods that goes off to the left, like if you're looking down the power line, and then that ridge dumps off into a big bottom. They roost on that point, so you could go there, and this is exactly what I'm going to go do. You can go there, and you can hear them gobbling on that ridge point before they fly down, and you can kind of tell exactly where they're at. Well, then you can sit there, and if they don't continue to gobble, if they pop out and they cross that power line, well, then I know that they turned around, pitched down, and they're walking up the ridge point, and they're not dropping off down the ridge point.
Yep.
So that right there immediately tells me what one thing that they like to do, which sets up really well for me because I could just sit there and wait for them, and it'll just take some very light calling, maybe even just some scratching in the leaves to get them to come. And, that's a place where we found a lot of fresh scratching early last year. So I'll be interested to see if they're scratching in that same spot this year. That's another thing we talked about last week was looking for that fresh scratch.
Yeah.
And that was an instance where we did find that really fresh scratch. It was opening week, and they had just torn up that hillside. There was fresh poop all over the place. All the pine straw was real lofted, and just fresh looking. And sure enough, those birds were just all over it. And, we could have killed him, but we didn't. And the one I did end up killing did kind of the same thing. It was a similar situation where I moved and got way close to this turkey on the roost. And he was bedded. He was roosted right off this ridge point. I found that gobbler bed. He was roosted right off of this ridge point. And he pitched down onto the ridge point, pitched down towards me, cut the distance, but then he sat down there walking and gobbling. He probably got to he got so close over the lip of the hill that I thought about just standing up and seeing if I could see him and shoot him. But I was afraid that I've tried that before, and a lot of times you'll think he's right here, and you'll stand up and he's actually over here, and then you can't swing on him in time. It's never good to swing on a turkey. That usually doesn't work out in your favor. Yeah. So you got to be real careful with that. And I did end up killing him, but it took a long time, to actually I had to move on him several times. But that's one thing I was wondering in that situation. I was I wonder if I could have just clucked at him, and just played it a little more subtle, because I was wailing on him with a box call. And actually that same morning, he sat down there and gobbled probably 40 or 50 times on the ground. And he just did not want to come up to the top of that ridge. And a hen that was roosted way down the ridge came to him in the trees. So I see
tree
something.
Hopping.
She was literally limb hopping like a squirrel. She was walking out to the end of a limb and jumping to the next tree, and then walking up that limb and jumping to another one. And it was the craziest thing I've ever seen. I'm well, he could definitely see her. And they're looking at each other. And then finally she pitches down and they walk off. And I ended up going and getting in front of him and killing him. And he had 8 hens with him, which was crazy. But anyways, That's the one I ended up getting on the club last year.
Big old boss gobbler.
Big old boss gobbler, son. So,
Oh, let me ask you something. I forgot to ask. I forgot to ask Gary this on the podcast. So a lot of guys that I think we've talked to, and kind of like a lot of your old school turkey hunters, are just guys that like are real passionate turkey hunters, especially in the deep south specifically. You never hear them say Tom. It's a gobbler.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like if you talk to somebody and they start mentioning Tom, like, oh, I got a good Tom. I hear one of two things: either you're up from up north, okay,
Or you're green.
or you're super new. And it's like
that's
it's not a wrong term. It's a correct term, but it's like you just don't ever hear anybody say that.
Yeah.
That's like turkey hunted for a little while, especially like some of these older guys. Like you don't ever hear them rarely, unless there's a couple guys we've interviewed from up north, and they'll say Tom. But like very rarely they call it a Tom turkey. It's a gobbler.
It's kind of like the thing. He said it one time. They were talking about coyotes, and that people who have never killed a coyote normally say coyote, and people who have killed one call them coyotes. Like it's just two different. I don't know. It's kind of like that with turkeys. I feel like I actually agree with that. That's a good point.
Yeah.
And some people, and I think this is more of like a Midwestern thing, but some people say longbeards. That's more. I feel like that's more like a Missouri, like that area thing.
I know some guys down south that say
I know a couple guys.
Got me a good long beard out there.
Long beard.
Yeah,
but I know more guys that say gobbler more religiously than that.
He's
Yeah.
a gobbler.
Gobbler.
It might be a Jake, but he's a gobbler.
He's a gobbler.
Nah.
Big old gobbler.
Yeah. No ER. It's A at the end of it. Gobbler.
Man, yeah, that was a fun episode. I'm really glad that we got to do that. It was a good time. Always fun going to the Houndstooth headquarters, and also it was really fun getting to learn how to use that Spurmaster turkey call from Gary.
For sure.
That was really neat because he knows a lot about the call that I didn't know.
Yeah.
About taking your the pressure of your hand, like how hard you grip the striker actually changes the pitch of it.
Yep.
You can get so many different tones out of that one call. It's really neat. We were just out here practicing with them, so that was pretty fun. And you can get a discount on them. What's the promo code?
Yeah, you can get a discount on any of the Houndstooth calls. I think it's 15% off, and the code is SOP, Southern Outdoorsman Podcast, SOP24 for 15% off. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. That, and I'll tell you another one. That little success call.
Oh yeah.
Dude, after at NWTF and Derek showing how he uses it, which Derek's a guy that kind of works with Houndstooth, and he's from North Alabama. He's a big friction call guy. He doesn't like to run mouth calls, and he uses this little success call, this little friction call. And man, he had some cool stories about like you just seal and deal with the gobbler up close using that thing because you can operate one-handed. You don't have to use two hands, so you can have kind of like gun propped up and then be able to run that left hand and run that call. That's that one. And the Turkey Master is like what I look at as like that little public land.
The Spurmaster.
Oh, what I
said? Turkey Master.
Oh yeah, Spurmaster. No, I'm sorry, Spurmaster. Don't say it again. But just like an awesome little, like kind of subtle public land call that even Gary said. It's like it's not just a tree call. Like you can run that thing all day long and actually call in birds from a long distance away with it because of how good they can hear.
Yeah, well, that's something too that I need to work on personally because that's something I don't have a lot of confidence with is calling soft because I don't know. There's something about. You just want to like crank on a call, like do some cut and do some loud yelps or something to get them to respond, especially if you're just trying to strike one. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to sit down and just soft call and just be real patient like that. But the guys who I know who are good at that are like Gary. They're birding out every single year. Mm-hmm. They're really good turkey hunters.
Well, I'll tell you another one who does it real soft. Who's been on podcasts a bunch in the past is Jared Smith.
Yeah.
So Jared Smith's a past guest from Alabama that, especially for somebody that's trying to build more confidence calling, I think, and also setting up. I mean, Jared's a straight up woodsman, but he talks about that a lot, like just being super soft, super subtle, and letting that turkey try to come find you instead of pinpoint you.
Yeah.
And here's one of his episodes. This is back in 2021. It's episode 256, "The Art of Hunting the Tough Birds" with Jared Smith. Again, episode
that's a good one.
246. And he talks a ton about that. He's like, I got patience. I'll hang out with the bird all day long, a gobbler all day long if I have the opportunity to. Especially like on some private land where you don't have like the restrictions like you have on the public land where we have a 1 o'clock cutoff now. He kills a lot of his turkeys midday and then the early afternoon. Mm-hmm. Once they're kind of, especially early season, once they're kind of broken out of their hens, they're a little more eager. And he's like, a lot of them come in quiet. He's like, they've heard me over the last hour or so making some super soft calls and just clucking and purring the whole 9 yards, not doing any aggressive yelps or cuts. And he's like, a lot of times they slip in there strutting, but they're not gobbling coming in. And he's like, you just get to take a crack at them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a really good point. And I think if you really think about that from like a versatility standpoint, it's like it makes you so much more versatile in situations, especially if a gobbler's got a bunch of hens with them.
Yeah,
like you probably can compete with the hen if you're decent caller and trying to get one of the hens to kind of come over to you and bring the whole flock to you. Like Lyle talked about doing that last year in Tennessee with his wife Summer, and it's just like I can see that working, but it's also like kind of that subtle call. Like at some point he might break out of that group. Yeah. And also there might be a satellite gobbler somewhere in that area that, hears you. He comes investigating, and then next thing you know, you're got your bird for the day.
Definitely. All right, let's hit some Q&As. Okay. Let's get after them. You can submit Q&As at our website. We got a whole page for them. We're taking turkey Q&As right now. Y'all heard us ask one of those to Gary and Lyle Monday. I almost said yesterday. We recorded it yesterday.
Yeah.
So we want to keep doing that with these turkey guests. So y'all make sure you write in turkey Q&As. We got a couple more in the hopper right now, but we need more of them. So y'all write them in. Let us know what your questions are. All right, this is it. We're going to hit some deer ones today. This one is from Scott Addis in southeast Mississippi. He said, the majority of the bucks I'm finding are using gallberry thickets to travel in with nothing but tall pines and zero cover up a tree. How would you approach going after these deer? I feel exposed in my saddle, and I'm debating on using my climber to keep the tree behind me for cover. So he's saying that like having that back cover behind you of the tree might be better than hanging off, because you can feel kind of exposed in a saddle when you're hanging off the side of the tree, and unless they're coming from directly on the other side of the tree, it can be kind of hard. So
the same thing with a climber. That only works if they're coming right at you, which you don't want the deer coming right at you, because that's gonna be a super hard shot opportunity, especially if you're bow hunting or gun hunting. So you kind of want that crossing pattern. Mm-hmm. And I get Scott, kind of what you're saying with that, like you're exposing your saddle. This is one of the things that we've talked about on the podcast, and I'm making the switch too. Andrew already made the switch this year, is going to one sticking.
Yeah.
And getting up a little bit higher.
Yep.
Because especially in a lot of those areas, if you can get above 25 feet, and also, practice your bow hunting like that. But if you're gun hunting, to me, it doesn't really matter. You can get 40, 50 feet up if you really want to, as long as the deer's like not just right underneath you. But if you get up high enough in that kind of cover, I don't ever see deer really looking up a whole bunch in that kind of environment. Mm-hmm. Just because, and I've killed deer in a situation, not really a gallberry thicket, but like thin pines, big tall pines that had like a lot of understory, like a lot of brushy understory, like saplings underneath. Mm-hmm. And I was only using just 4 climbing sticks. I wasn't all that high. I might have got to like 18 feet. Yeah. And actually, that was one of the days I was hunting with a handgun, a pistol, 10 millimeter, killed a doe that day. But the one thing I've noticed in that kind of cover, the higher you can get, the better you can see down to that stuff. Mm-hmm. And again, the big thing is, as long as you're not moving a whole bunch, I don't think you're going to have a lot of issues. Also, making sure that you have the sun to your back if you have that opportunity is huge.
Yeah, big help.
Because like if the sun's to your back and you're kind of shadowed out up against the side of that tree, whether you're in a climber, a lock on, or a saddle, I think it helps tremendously, especially if potentially like those deer are going to be coming with the sun in their face a little bit or quartering into them. It makes it a little bit harder for them to see you. But yeah, that's just something we deal with in the Southeast. So like if you're talking about going back to a climber, you can try doing that. But the problem is, unless you have like a really low profile climber, and even if you do, you're going to make a lot of racket going through that thicket, trying to get into a spot, unless you're hunting the edge of it with a climber. That's where I think the saddle really plays a huge advantage. And again, looking at going to a one stick where you can climb ever how high up you want, and also getting like a one stick. There's a couple of one sticks on the market now, because you're using my old one, which I don't really want to use that one. I want to use one with a larger platform up top that you can actually almost like free stand on or pivot a lot easier on.
Yeah.
And if you have something like that, one thing I love to do, especially like using a larger platform saddle hunting, is I'll free stand if need be to like stand right up against the tree. Yeah. And I've done that, especially if there's deer coming through that I'm not overly interested in shooting. Like maybe there's a bunch of does come through and like I can't shoot a doe, or I don't want to shoot a doe or a young buck. Sometimes I'll stand up. If I can't get pivoted around the tree, I'll stand up and like hug right up next to the tree and just like stand there next to the tree, and it helps out tremendously.
One hard thing about it though is the fiddle factor with saddles. Like if you don't have a setup that you're very comfortable with, then you're going to end up moving a lot. And in that situation where it's wide open, like you absolutely cannot afford to move.
Yeah.
And so you better make sure that your saddle is super dialed and that you can sit completely still for 15, 20 minutes at a time without having to adjust at a minimum. Ideally, even longer than that. But this was my problem with the saddle, and why I ended up buying a climber a couple years back and using a climber kind of interchangeably. It's for this exact situation because, I got the saddle to be lighter and everything, but it ended up kind of hurting me in situations like that where I'm in a telephone pole of a tree and I can't get but like 15 to 18 feet high if I'm really stretching. And I'm like, man, if I just had a climber, I could shoot way up this thing.
Before you went to a one stick.
Yeah, and so then I went to the one stick, and I didn't touch my climber one single time this year. It's been hanging out in the garage like all year, never touched it. And yeah, I think the answer to that is just getting really high. I mean, that's really the only answer to it in my opinion. And having something you're comfortable with. And for me, the one stick helps. You can still do it with the climber. Just
you're gonna have to adjust.
You're gonna have to adjust your climber going up to truly get that high. And again, we've talked about it before. Like Scott, I'm not saying you're like this, but a lot of people think they're getting a lot higher than they really are. Like I remember the first time Mike climbed up a tree. And like how high he thought he was versus how high he actually was. Like this is like the first time. Like, sorry, Mike, I'm picking on you. But he climbed up and he's like, am I high enough? Like, I feel like I'm pretty high. And I like walked over there and I touched the bottom of his platform. I was like, you ain't high enough. Like, you got to go higher than this. And he got to where he could climb really high this year. And Sam did too. So Sam took the training. I put Sam on the last day in one of my spots. I was like, see that limb up there? He's like, yeah. I'm like, you got to climb to that limb. And it was a little bit windy that day. And he texted me. He was like, the training wheels are off with a skull emoji. I was like, yeah, it's a little sketchy, sometimes when you're tree surfing. But that's what it takes. You just got to get way high up there and practice adjusting your climber. This is a great time of year to do that, by the way. It's not deer season, so you're not trying to do it on a hunt. It's still pretty cool outside. So go find you a pine tree and practice with a little bit. Make sure the top and bottom parts of your climber are attached. Make sure you're climbing with a safety harness. But, if you don't want to buy one stick or if that doesn't look like something that would appeal to you, because it didn't look like it would appeal to me until I actually tried it, I highly recommend it. You can use your climber, but just practice with it, man. But, yeah, you got to get higher in the tree. That's my opinion. The only other thing you can do is if you're hunting like a particular deer trail. I've done this from time to time. If you're hunting a particular deer trail, I will sometimes like walk out, not stand in the deer trail, but stand near it and turn around and look back at the tree I'm going to get in and seeing if there's any trees behind it. It could be a tree 15 feet behind you that's got a big bushy limb coming out, and I'll try to climb where I'm even with that limb. Even though it's pretty far in the background, it's still something that kind of breaks me up. So you might have to resort to that as well. But yeah, dude, just get way up that tree, boy. Climb as high as you can. All right. Next up, Tyler Hargrove from Alabama. He said, hey, guys, I'm a first-year hunter and hunting public in East Alabama. What is your guys' take on finding Mylar balloons in the woods that have an area having good thermals for bucks? I found an area with balloons laying about every 20 to 40 yards, and there's rubs and some scrapes around the area. I just haven't actually seen any deer, buck, or doe. Just curious if y'all have any insight on this or an episode you direct me to listen on. Thanks for the podcast. It helps me a ton when trying to maximize my hunts and keeps me open-minded when hitting the woods. So the balloon thing is interesting. The theory being that the balloons are concentrating in a certain area because the dominant wind currents or thermal currents in an area are carrying these balloons, and because people let go of a balloon, it goes and floats off into the atmosphere or whatever, and then it comes down to the location. And if you find a spot where there's several of these balloons, that tells you that for some reason the wind or thermals kind of pool in this spot, which in theory a big buck would like. The problem, in my opinion, with it is it doesn't really tell you whether or not he likes that spot in daylight. And I think that's kind of one thing that he's getting at here.
Yep.
Like, and this was like a big thing on all the mobile hunting Facebook groups a couple years ago, where people were finding a balloon in the woods and they're like, is there, like they get all excited about it. If I find like one balloon laying in the woods, I really pay no attention to it. Now, if you're legitimately finding like 5 or 6 balloons in one spot, I'd probably take note of that, especially if there's buck sign there, and be like, okay, all these balloons, they're collecting here for a reason, and there's buck sign. I mean, I just throw a camera up in it. I don't know if I'd really hunt it or not, unless my camera told me.
Well, it depends on how the cover looks. Like if it's wide open and there's sign there, but like there's no good cover anywhere near that area, I'm like probably not doing this during daylight. So like I've never paid attention to it. I don't really care to. I know some guys do. Some guys swear by it. Some guys don't. I think it's kind of funny. I know some people that, again, maybe have had some kind of success with it. But yeah, I don't really pay attention to it.
I'd pay more attention to the rubs and the scrapes and not so the balloons. It's just kind of like, oh, cool.
Yeah, and looking at, does it make sense from a cover and security standpoint that a buck's going to use that during daylight?
Yeah.
If it's wide open woods and there's no like low ditch or anything that a buck can travel through, probably something I'm not really going to pay attention to. If you're curious about it, like Andrew was saying, like you're saying, throw a camera out on it, see if you get any daylight activity, especially on a scrape in those areas, or even a really big rub or cluster rubs. Maybe throw a camera on it and to see if there's like a window of time that bucks are daylighting in that area. But other than that, I would not just throw everything in on a spot like that.
Yeah, I mean, we've on our mountain unit that we hunt, I've found places with several balloons out there that were just void of deer sign. Maybe there's deer coming through there, I don't know, but I would assume if there's deer coming through there regularly, there'd be a trail, scrape, rub, something, tracks. Didn't find anything. So don't put too much stock in it, but it is interesting. It is interesting. Maybe use it as a like a learning example again of like the main thing is like if you're newer and there are multiple balloons in one spot, they are collecting there for a reason as far as wind and thermals go. So maybe look at the map and try to figure out why that's happening, and that'll be a good lesson about wind and thermals. Mm-hmm. But I don't necessarily think that means that that's a good spot to kill a big buck.
Yep.
So, all right, last one. This is from Josh Ritchie from Georgia. He said, I actually have a ton of questions about hunting public land. I've always hunted private/leased land, and the cost is just getting crazy. I want to explore public, but I really don't know where to start. I have located them on a map and know where they all are. All are WMAs that I would access. But how do you access these areas? Can you just walk in at any time and scout? Can you park? Can you park beside the road? Checking in and out, actually killing a deer. What are the next steps? There are so many questions, but I don't want to flood this more than I already have. I think this could be a super beneficial podcast because I do not know anyone who personally hunts public land. So you say that you're in Georgia. Georgia's a little bit different than some states. This is going to vary state by state, but I believe in Georgia, to go on their WMAs, you have to have some kind of license. They make like a fishing license, a hunting license. There might be like a land pass, like an access pass that's pretty cheap that you can get, if I remember correctly. But you're supposed to have one of those to be on it. Because when we hunted Georgia, all our camera guys had to get one of those little access passes.
So what I was going to say is the best resource, Josh, and this is for anybody that's like interested in hunting public land, is literally like the best thing you can do is call the DNR office, whatever organization that kind of, manages y'all's public land, manages y'all's, hunting, and just ask them like, hey, I'm curious in hunting public land. What, like a lot of websites, and I'll be honest, like Alabama's got this. I think Georgia has this as well. I think Arkansas as well. They've got like a tab. If you go over to like their DNR's website or online, you can actually find information on like just general rules for public land, from like an access standpoint, things you can and cannot do kind of across the board in public. And then what you can do is if there's specific pieces of public you're looking at, Josh, you can actually go onto the website and there will be a tab. At least every state I've hunted in the Southeast has this, where you can go to like, if it's like a wildlife management area or national forest. National forest is a little bit different because it's federally managed, but especially your WMAs or state managed pieces of public, there'll be a list of them on their website. There'll be some kind of tab on there. They have it on Alabama's page. I've seen it on the Georgia page. Tennessee, Tennessee's got a really good one. Arkansas as well. And if you click on the name of the piece of public that you're looking at, as long as it's like a state-ran management area, it will have all the hunting seasons because it may differ. Georgia's very, very strange about how they run hunting seasons. Is not just like the statewide season. Like when it's bow season, you can bow hunt. When it's gun season, you can gun hunt. Muzzleloader season, you can muzzleloader hunt. It's not like that on a bunch of different pieces of public, really across any state. So you need to look at like the specific piece of public that you're interested in. Go into the website, the DNR's website, and it will have all the specific regulations on first off, what can you do on the property? Some property you might not be able to deer hunt. It might be small game only and turkey hunting, or you might be able to deer hunt and small game hunt, but you can't turkey hunt on it.
Or it might be only quota deer hunts.
Yeah, so like you need to look at all that, and then when you have more questions after you kind of look through the pieces of the public you're interested in, then I'd call the office back again and ask them specific questions on these pieces of public. And if it says quota hunt, ask them, how does the quota system work? I'm not familiar with the quota system or the draw system in Georgia. I am in Alabama, but it's a little bit different here than y'all's properties are. But just ask them those specific questions so you have a good understanding of the rules, the regulations, how the hunting seasons work. And then you can ask a little bit more about like parking. I know in my past experience, as long as you are not blocking a gate on a piece of public land, you have to park to the side of a gate where a vehicle can get past you. If they've got to open the gate up and go do some timber work or whatever they're doing, you cannot be blocking a gate, and that's pretty much any piece of public I've ever been to.
Yeah,
you got to be off the side of the gate
across the states too.
Yeah. So you got to be off the side of the road. And then also if you park on a main road, you have to be far enough off the main road you're not impeding traffic. You can't park in the road. You can't have half your truck in the road. It's got to be completely off the side of the road so you don't impede traffic moving through a place. Also, there'll be some regulations in some areas about whether or not you can actually hang tree stands for an extended period of time. Like if you're used to hunting leased property, you're probably used to going out hanging ladder stands, lock-on, stuff like that. Maybe in the summertime for your fall spots, some public land, a lot of public land, you can't have them there. Some places, it's a 24-hour limit of how long your stand's in there. And what that means is if a game warden comes across your stand, they have, or someone else, they have the full right. If they want to take that stand, if it's not legally supposed to be there longer than a certain amount of time, like if you're not in that stand, someone could actually come and grab that. I know a lot of people don't agree with that, but I know of game wardens on certain pieces of property that they don't allow trail cameras to be out there, like zero trail cameras. You can't.
I'll caveat that too with that's not super common though. Like that's pretty. It's like your general WMA. You can go put a lock on out. You can go put a camera out and leave it, and you're fine. But there's specific areas, and that kind of goes back to what you're saying about you got to kind of take them by a case basis. So like a refuge is going to be managed a lot different than a WMA, which is going to be managed different from a national forest.
Yeah. And
usually like the really stringent regulations are on a refuge.
Well, the thing is, but I mean, some of the WMAs in Georgia, from what I've seen, is kind of stringent of like on what they allow. But that's the thing is, you just got to figure out what properties you're interested in. Look them up online on the Georgia's DNR's website. It'll have everything listed out. Look at the specs on that property, what they allow, what they don't allow, and then that's a good step going forward on accessing a property and figuring out, can you go out and scout different times of year, just all that kind of stuff. But a lot of that you can find on the website, and that's going to be your best bet for just finding that kind of information and making sure you don't do anything that you're going to get a ticket for or getting a fine for just because you didn't do the research and looking ahead of time. So anybody interested in hunting public land, if it's out of state, in your home state, do some research. You can find a lot of information on the DNR's website and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, also Georgia, I mean, really every state I've hunted in the last several years has an app you can download. And I don't know what Georgia's is called, but you can find it fairly easy on the internet. And it's got your regulations on there. It's got your licenses on there where you can purchase your license. It's called
the Go Outdoors GA app.
So, and it's like the state of Georgia with a fish, a bird, and a buck on it.
Yep.
So get that app, and it'll have your regulations in there. And also, it's how you will check into WMAs, because the several WMAs we've hunted in Georgia, you do have to check in on. And you can either do it on a piece of paper, like there'll be like a kiosk somewhere, like by the check station or skin shed, there'll be like a kiosk. You can sign in right there, or you could sign in on your app. And Alabama is actually like that as well.
Yeah. So I'm actually on the app right now for Georgia. Again, it's the Go Outdoors GA app. It's got all your hunting regulations, your WMA regulations, everything's on that app. So again, you don't even have to go to the website. You just download the app and look at everything.
Yeah, and you're going to want it, like if you've already found a couple of WMAs you're interested in, just go find that WMA. You can go and search it on Georgia's DNR website, or you can do it on the app and read the regulations for that WMA, that individual one. And it's going to tell you, okay, here's when you can bow hunt. Oh, here's a rifle quota hunt. So you have to put in for that hunt and draw it to go hunt that. You can't just go out there and hunt.
Yep.
So, yeah, there's a lot of regulations like that. But like you said, just call the DNR or a local game warden, and they'll help you out.
Yeah. Yep.
Definitely get contact info for a local game warden. That's always super. If you just really want to cross your T's and dot your I's, do that. Because if you build a relationship with that game warden and you're brand new, even if he catches you accidentally doing something, but he knows you and knows that you're new, like you're probably not going to get a ticket for it.
As long as you're not baiting or doing anything egregious.
Yeah, as long as you're not doing anything egregious.
That's another thing. You coming from private land, you're not allowed to bait on public.
Yeah, dude. Interesting stuff. I'm ready for turkey season to be here. I'm ready to go out and start listening. I wanted to go listen this morning, but we had a late night, so I did not go listen this morning. Anyways, you got any plans or anything?
No, we're just leaving. Well, by the time this episode comes out, I'll probably be back from South Dakota. But I'm headed to South Dakota for the Pheasant Fest. Kind of like NWTF, but for upland hunting up in South Dakota, Sioux Falls. So it's going to be pretty fun. Pretty excited to go. Go talk to a bunch of people and see some people I know and, talk to just a bunch of interesting individuals. So we won't have the dogs or anything, but going to old Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And then other than that, just getting back and getting ready for turkey season because it's about to kick off. It's about to get real.
Less than a month out.
Yep.
Less than a month out.
Anyway, yeah, other than that, appreciate everybody getting us been ordering all the different apparel from our website. We're working on some new designs as well and getting some new hats ordered. But other than that, again, appreciate y'all watching, appreciate y'all listening, and we'll catch y'all back on the next episode from the Southern Outdoors and Podcast. And remember, guys, y'all stay Southern.